Hey, what's happening? Facebook, America, people listening. I wanted to comment on something I read yesterday in the newspaper. It had to do with Barack Obama's legacy as president after 2 years of faking it in office. So, what is Barack Obama's legacy for me? Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, for me, Barack Obama's a fraud. Um, and I say that because I look at his early decisions in his presidency, and what I see is a man who brought in two Zionists, Rahm Emanuel, David Axelrod. Uh, David Axelrod was the money behind Barack Obama's pushing into office anyway. But on November 7th of 2008, he brings in Rahm Israel Emanuel. What a name, huh? Rahm Israel Emanuel. Now, Zionists aren't the problem with the world, okay? They're not even the problem with America. They're just part of it. Um, Zionists, if you don't know, are those who support a free and independent Israel, which would be fine, maybe, if Israelis and Palestinians lived in harmony, which is not the case, as we know. There are occupied territories, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, for example, where we have overcrowding. And not only that, but these occupied territories, which are supposed to be settlements for Palestinians, have become settlements for Israeli Jews as well. And there lies much of the problem. Palestinians, on a day-to-day basis, are kicked out of their homes, told to move, but they're not given any home to go to. They're just kicked out on the streets with nowhere to go. We're talking children, old people, and mothers and fathers, your everyday folks. And what's going on in Israel is no different than what happened here in America with slavery and segregation, the Jim Crow South. It's no different than apartheid in South Africa. These are the same crimes against humanity. They're no different. You can't separate the two. Palestinians have every right to live on the land, as do the Israeli Jews. In fact, Palestinians may have more of a right because they were there prior to the Balfour Declaration, which was the 1917 letter written by Rothschild, essentially to the English government, asking to give the land of Israel to the Jews. It was not the land of Israel at the time. It was part of the Ottoman Empire and Palestine. So that started the influx of Jewish people into that area. Now, there was already some Jews there, but the Jews that were there were living in harmony with their neighbors, their Arab neighbors, their Palestinian neighbors. So Jews and Palestinians were living in harmony up until the Balfour Declaration, which essentially started bringing in this mass influx of Jews. Now, it wasn't such a mass influx at that time, but come World War II, Jews were being taken from all over Europe and essentially taken to the land of Israel to save many of their lives, which is not a bad thing, again. But it's not until, the Irgun, things like the Irgun, which, here, let me read something for you to give you some insight. Rahm Emanuel's father was an Israeli terrorist, and by that, he actually wasn't an Israeli terrorist. He was a Jewish terrorist. The appointment of Rahm Emanuel triggered widespread interest in Israel. Of course, his middle name is Israel, the native country of his former Jewish underground fighter father. The older Emanuel, a pediatrician born in Jerusalem, was a member of Irgun, the hardline militant group which fought for Jewish independence until 1948. It was described as terrorist at the time by Britain. Mr. Emanuel's appointment could reassure Israel that Mr. Obama will continue America's close alliance with Israel. So, Rahm Emanuel's father worked for a terrorist organization, according to England, according to the Brits, according to many European countries. Why would that be significant? I think it's significant now because Palestinians are considered the terrorists in Israel, at least according to the propaganda, but they're not doing anything different than what Rahm Emanuel's father did. Rahm Emanuel's father was trying to get the Brits out of Palestine, the land of Palestine at the time, because he knew that the British were actually trying to create a living condition of harmony at the time. They were trying to stop the fighting between the Palestinians and the new Jews that were coming in to settle in that area. So the Brits were kind of like, trying to work some harmony out, some peace. But the Irgun, which was an underground movement, didn't want peace. They wanted, the land, and they wanted the Palestinians off that land. And there was many massacres that show this in our history. So there's my problem. Barack Obama, a black president, should have some sense of history in America and understand America went through its own apartheid, its own segregation. And blacks had to fight their ass off for their independence in this country, for their freedom. And, now that they so-called have their freedom, of course, we know things aren't all on equal standards here in this country. But sure, freedom's out there, but, nothing was ever given back to the blacks of this country for all the hard work and sacrifice by their ancestors, because our ancestors worked for nothing in your cotton fields. And this country was founded on the backs of black men and women. So that needs to be understood. How can an educated black man that claims to be an American like Barack Obama not see this fatal contradiction of reality? How can he not see that Israel is essentially America in the late 50s? I mean, segregation, the Jim Crow South. It's no different than the occupied territories in Israel. And, Palestinians are treated no differently than blacks were in this country, and no different than blacks were treated in South Africa yada yada. I'm sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. But we get the point, okay? Apartheid, segregation, occupied territory. I mean, these all equal the same outcome. And that's all I'm saying. Who is Barack Obama? Ask the USA Today. He's a fraud. He's a fraud. And anybody with half an education will get that information and see for themselves exactly who their president is. He's a fraud. He's a complete and utter failure. He was since day one. He was since he signed the same exact stimulus package that George Bush signed. He doubled the amount of money going out. He actually more than doubled it. And this is our reality. This is not some dreamed up BS. This is real. What's real is not what's happening in Tucson. That was an event. But, that was more of a dream for me because that was just a few people in the occupied territories, of which there are 10 million Palestinians in refugee camps living with no shelter or damn near no shelter, living with nothing, living with no socks and shoes. This is reality for this world and for this country, because every bomb that ever fell on Palestinians in the occupied territories were made here in America. Many of them were. Many. Maybe not everyone, but many. And Barack Obama supports that. So how can you support him? Supporting Barack Obama is killing Iraqis, killing Palestinians. It's killing innocents all over the globe. So do yourself a favor. And I'm not saying come next election, vote Republican, that's going to fix something. It's not. Vote green. Vote third party. We don't have a two-party system anymore. Both parties are part of the same clan. And that clan is not the clan that's fighting for the American people. It's fighting for the corporations in this world. It's fighting for the people with the money and making sure that that money stays in their hands and stays in their kids' hands and stays in their kids' hands. This is what they're looking out for. They're not looking out for you and me. They don't know our hardship. And if they did know, they don't care. Well, on that note, I'm going to check out. I thank everybody for listening, and I hope that you get something out of this, because reality can be a bitch, but intelligent minds, it's way more important. Do your research, read about who Barack Obama is, and come to the same conclusions I did. He's a fraud. One love. Peace be all.